everybody. So I'm on here today because I just have a few things on my mind, and not simply on my mind. It's been on my mind for a while, and how to like deal with it, how to talk about it in a way that's productive, that certainly is recorded on the internet, has been my concern. Um, and I know y'all aren't used to me wearing my glasses as much, but right now I've been looking at screens way too much, and I'm still recovering. This is my first day, like really off, knowing I don't have to go to work. Which oddly enough, my twitch is gone. 'Cause I twitched for like 2.5 weeks. Anyway, so I had an experience this year that isn't unfamiliar per se. It's not. It's really not. It's not. At least the attitude involved. So I've had a rough school year for many reasons, and I've had a great school year for many reasons. And if I could describe myself as a teacher based on what I think and based on what students think, I am a very tough teacher. I didn't even know people use the word strict in regular conversations until, I got to this school. And that's how I would be described. I would also be described as the teacher you learn the most. Johnson is tough. Like, this is the most I've ever learned in my life. Okay. And from the time I began in independent schools, which, are loosely known to other people as private schools, and it's the same thing, but that's what they call it, independent schools. I clearly have less African American students, specifically African American, and Black students. They're usually, West African or Caribbean. And there is sometimes this silent animosity toward me. And I'm not the only one who experienced it. I mean, it only like 6 of us working there anyway, Black people. But as a Black woman, me and another Black woman had this conversation. And you can't trust people at work, but when she said this to me, I was like, oh wait, that happens to you too. Okay. Anyway, I am somebody, and y'all have heard me say this before, I didn't grow up with a whole lot. Don't want to get into it, but I didn't grow up with a lot. But the things my parents did give to me was a love and appreciation for learning and for reading. Books are valuable. You don't throw them on the floor. I don't even know how people exist in houses where things are piled on top of the Bible. Like you wouldn't even do that. Like, now that is the highest book. But reading was something that was encouraged consistently. The way I would get money to buy books in high school, and I'm going somewhere with this, the way I would get money to buy books in high school was y'all remember the accelerated reader program? You did a lot in elementary school and somewhat in middle school, and people kind of phased out in high school. I knew them. And so I would read a lot of books, and they would sometimes give you a $20 gift card, a $50 gift card to Barnes and Noble if you were getting high scores. And that's how I would get. Okay. Anyway, so I had an experience this year with a African American student in American history. Okay. They do this thing where they don't put any students of color, or they try not to, at least. Over the past maybe 8 years or so, because students complained. They don't want to put any students of color in the class where they're only with white students because of the harm done. Now, the other part of that is y'all need to be training white kids to be in the class and to be considerate of the other person. But I understand. And I had an African American student. Now, this kid I had seen, okay? This is 10th grade. Keep this in mind. I had seen this kid a lot, but let me tell you where I saw this kid a lot. In the school bathroom. The school bathroom perpetually. And she would be in there just playing around with her braids and, always had the attitude like, I don't want you to say anything to me, this, that, and the other. First of all, I wasn't. And I could already tell and I think Black people have tried, there's these extremes going on where Black people have tried to correct themselves and previous notions so much that we pretend like we're not looking at the kind of people that we're actually looking at. Okay? I knew what kind of okay? I knew what kind of person this was. Okay? So I get them in my class and I remember going, oh, not that kid that's always in the bathroom with the attitude. And she tried that stuff. Like she would, go to the bathroom for like 30 minutes, had a 45-minute time period, was failing her test, wasn't completing her work or turning her work in, like pressing turn in on Google Classroom, but like it's not really done. And I had a parent teacher conference only happens once. It's like 5 minutes in high school for that particular subject. And I remember her mother and father walking in. And, I said hello. I said, my name is Salah, whatever. And her mother came and sat right in front of me, not like a I'm here to, investigate you kind of thing. And she was like, oh, the infamous Dr. Johnson. Now, my first thought is, do you know what infamous means? But she did as this conversation went on. You're known for negative reasons. And I said, oh, in my head, I'm like, oh, this is what we're doing? But out loud, I said, well, I guess it depends on who you ask. I said, first, let me give you an overview of the course. Then I explained what had been happening with their daughter. I said, look, her work, I have put many comments on her work to come and see me, to set an appointment time with me so we can sit down and talk about her work so she can improve. They don't come to any of these meetings. They don't ask questions. And so I can only help a student to the extent that they want to be helped. And I'm not seeing that. And the reason why I am so clear is because I learned by talking around it, especially with people in these environments, because New York is a different kind of place. You have to be clear with people. And so I said, well, what have you heard on her end or whatever? And the mother goes, well, first of all, you cold call on people. I said, yes, I do. This is my class. Excuse me? And I said, but I don't cold call on your daughter. I said, your daughter emailed me at the beginning of the year and said she had really bad anxiety. And that's why it was hard for her to participate. Now, to some degree, could I believe it? Yes. When you are somebody who experienced the suicide of an 8th grader before, you're careful after that. Not that it had anything to do necessarily with something I did, but, and that wasn't even a kid that was on like the concerned list of mental health issues. So yeah. So I said, yes, I do. And she was like, well, I know the big deal is participation. I said, well, no, that's not the only issue. I said, on her checklist, I went into details, or a progress report, whatever. I went into details about the work that she hasn't done and the quality of it, and how she has not been, proactive in trying to sit down with me so that we can work it out. She was like, well, we're educators too. We know how this goes. And I was like, oh. First of all, I don't believe that they're educators. First of all, your husband came in here smelling like weed. Not that that means he's not an educator, but the educator term, I get it. But a lot of people use it when they are not involved directly in a teaching classroom process, like being a teacher. I think honestly, they're entrepreneurs. They'll probably be doing a credit repair business next year. And then after that, selling hair on TikTok shop. Like they seem like those kind of people, but whatever. So I said, well, do y'all let her read, her progress report? And she was like, yeah. And so, I think she figures we saw it, she saw it, it doesn't matter. Now in my head, no, not in my head, on the tip of my tongue, I want to go, did y'all read it? Because y'all are coming in here with this foolishness. Now she's like, and that can be tough for her. Your style is this, that, and the other. And I'm taking it. I said, yeah, and I realized sometimes that's difficult to adjust to. I said, but it's at the end of the day, she's going to be in my class for the rest of the year. So I think the way to help her is I would appreciate it if you really encourage her to actually sit down with me so that I can help her do better. Now, typically kids like this, and this was no different. This was a problem in every class, by the way. Okay, but she gonna give it to me. And the father goes, now mind you, while the mother's making excuses for what she hasn't done, in the same conversation, the father goes, well, I mean, according to her, she's killing it. But, and I just sat there. But I know this motherfucker didn't just say this to me. And he goes, I mean, but based on what you're saying, that's probably not the case. And I was like, actually, not only is it not the case, I said, there is nothing I have ever said or written down on her work to make her think that she was killing it in my class. I said, so I'm not actually sure even where that's coming from. Now, the mother's making excuses for all she doesn't do, and the father's saying she thinks she's killing it. What kind of crazy stuff is going on? Right? And their child is a budding narcissist. And I see why. The mother is, one of those people that don't take responsibility. So there was really no resolve in this conference. But whenever you have a conference, and I've had, don't get me wrong, I've had worse, okay? Whenever you have a conference like that, you always want to put like the head or of the, whether it's middle or high school, you want to make sure you let them know, right? Because parental complaints are regular in private school. So I did go and talk to him. I said, look, this is what happened. And he's like, oh. He was like, yeah, I know. I taught them last year. He was like, would not come to meet with me. Not only that, wouldn't turn in their work, would just like not come to class. And I said, yeah, I said, but honestly, I don't know that this is going to get any better because the parents don't seem to be concerned about her doing better. They seem more concerned about my teaching style. So I said, I'm putting this on your radar. I'm letting you know. Okay. And I'm also letting you know, I have a lot more sympathy for this in September in terms of, oh, I'm kind of nervous with her than I do in November. Okay. Okay. So this goes on. We read a book called Kindred by Octavia Butler. And I love that Afrofuturist historical novel. This kid skips class for a week when we are discussing the book. Her mother would come and pick her up early from school, like right before my class. Now, somebody who is a so-called educator, you usually don't have that level of time to just pop up and pick up your kids so they cannot be in the class they don't want to be in. This goes on, and the beat goes on. I make all my students in the 10th grade and my electives moving up in 11th and 12th. And I know you're like, where's the story going? I promise you I'm getting to it. So they had to write a research paper. Okay. And the research paper has benchmarks, right? So I can make sure, hey, you have this amount of sources. This source isn't an appropriate source. I comment on it. Thesis statement, research outline, final draft of the paper, all those things, right? And at a private school, you have learning specialists and all the things, okay, all the things. This kid has BS their way through everything. Then on the weekend before the paper is due, I had also come up to them again and I said, look, you haven't communicated with me, but you have to have books, right? You have to use sources. I said, it doesn't matter whether they're ebooks or, physical copies. I said, but it has to come from books by authors. And she was like, okay, I'll go to the library. She came back. This is 10th grade, mind you, with a photography book of an African American organization in the 1960s and 1970s, the Black Panther Party. And I said, this won't suffice. I said, this is full of pictures. She was like, well, I was going to use the stuff in the back. I wasn't going to use the pictures. I said, well, no, you certainly couldn't use the pictures. No. I said, but it's a photography book. So what's back there is that 5 pages is to contextualize the pictures, not the movement. This kid didn't take any advice. Now, and the reason why I have them submitted on things like Google Classroom is because the comments never really are, the history of the comments at least are never deleted. So this kid turns in their paper, just as to be expected, okay? Now, it is not that I did not criticize other students' work. It was not that the deans weren't alert to when people were not doing their research process. The difference in this case is most of them came to me and said, Dr. Johnson, I don't understand. I was like, that's fine. That is why we're here to talk about it. This kid never did it. I'm just going to do this. The cover page of the research paper was Black Panther Party's influence, right? Now, that probably doesn't seem like a big deal to you. Parties being spelled Parties, not Party''S. This is just the cover page. It was a horrible paper. Horrible paper, just pulling out random Black history facts, not explaining anything. It was just poorly written, and it didn't have to be. I say all this to say, I know I go on and on about the importance of education in the Black community and the importance of education overall. It is concerning to me how deeply anti-intellectual this entire country is, while it still is perpetually gaining confidence in the lack of knowledge that everybody seems to have. People get on a microphone, people will take a quote from, goodquotes.com and think they understand Martin Luther King's history or Malcolm X. Y'all don't know what y'all are talking about. You don't. This takes years of study and focusing. That's okay. You have 2 Black parents in a 2-parent household claiming they're educators, and all they did was make excuses for their Black daughter who was skipping class, who wasn't learning, and is effectively, this is a word, retarding her own growth. I'm not calling her retarded, but I'm saying like slowing down your own growth because nobody's holding you accountable. Is this happening across the country? Yeah, it is not a Black thing. It is not a white thing. It is not a poor thing. It is not a rich thing. And I wish I could say it was. It is this kind of parenting that nobody can hurt my child. I'm going to protect my child from all the feelings. And these people don't even deal with their kids because you can't be raising her right. You can't be. Not to mention the dean and like 2 other adults had mentioned this to me. I said, please don't tell me anything else. If this kid wants to be a social media influencer, I'm like, this is the goal. This is not a kid that comes from money, by the way. And granted, in New York, I mean, to me to say, oh, really, your parents don't have $65,000 a year to pay, but is a student that went through a program that sets you up to go to private school and now is in private school and does no work. And her parents, I can already tell you, because I deal with these New York Black people all the time, seem to presume that because she's in a white environment and at a private school, that it doesn't matter whether she does her work or not. She's going to be just fine because of her association with whiteness. I don't know how delusional you can be, but I've seen people get pretty delusional. And I don't know what you think people see of your Black ass children when they walk out, but it's not their intelligence. It's not their strength. They don't even operate under the presumption, because many of their classmates, many of their white classmates certainly do not experience the same kind of consequences for their stupidity. That's the problem. And when I say this quote unquote issue with politics and respectability, and granted, Evelyn Higginbotham lays that out in her book, but a lot of y'all haven't read it. Y'all just presume it's like when black people say, you know, oh, you shouldn't do that in front of white people. There are some things we shouldn't do in front of white people. Let's start with saying the N-word. Let's start with making sure that when kids come to school, that they are dressed like they're going to school. Not just anything they want to wear. And I don't mean like, oh, a t-shirt and stuff, like things that I find inappropriate. And once again, this is across races, but the consequences, the way I hear white teachers talk about black girls who have done this is ridiculous, and I defend it. And the reason why I know it still happens is because a colleague told me, but the fact that I said something about the way in which they were chastising in private, you know, about these girls in the way they do the white girls, they now know not to say that around me. But it doesn't stop them from doing it. And I'm privy to conversations that your black ass and your black ass kids are not. And you seem to think they're going to be treated differently. Like Carmelo Anthony. And I'm not saying his parents are that, but I'm just making a point. Here he is being harassed, verbally assaulted. They've now had an email that was sent by cheerleaders who said that, what's that boy's name? It's a weird name. It's not a weird name, but it's one I want to forget. Anyway, that the man who called him a watermelon felon, you know, his kids, so on and so forth, they were harassing, like genuinely harassing. Another cheerleader wrote the email on another cheerleader's behalf and said she doesn't want to report this because she's afraid of what they will do. That was a habit, right? But look what happens to Carmelo Anthony for defending himself. You have to prepare your kids for a world. And I'm not saying his parents didn't. This is not at all. But what I'm saying is black kids live in a world where no matter what they do, it's going to be met with resistance and injustice and quite for outright just unfair responses. And preparing them for that helps them to be able to endure and resist it. And when I watch black kids feeling like they can do the bare minimum, and I push them, these people have sent their kids. Now this one just came like, like high school, that kind of thing. But when they finally do have a black teacher, like me or the other black teacher, they respond with so much hostility toward us. Well, this is what, nobody said anything about this before, so on and so forth. Yeah. In my mind, they don't care about you. They don't care whether you learn. They think you're lucky to be here. And so do you. But for different reasons. You're not any smarter than anybody else. These people just have more money than everybody else. I know that. And they have misinterpreted care. Black kids have misinterpreted care and somebody pushing you forth and forward and challenging you as a direct opposition to them. Then it becomes, oh, they're picking on me because I'm black. Or like, no. A sign of what people think about you is what they expect of you. So you've learned that being a good person and being a good teacher means leaving me alone, excusing, when I don't turn in work and, they don't really want to deal with your parents or anything like that. And they pass you along and you're writing like a 7th grader as a 12th grader. Not because you didn't have the opportunity, but because you chose to blow it and your parents start sending you to school was enough. Why? Okay, so this is the greater issue. I know you all have had to notice, not simply how stupid people are, but I mean really. And it's not simply a generational thing. These people were raised by other adults. Have y'all noticed when y'all talk to a lot of these kids, when I use the word degenerate, and I'm talking about in general, but especially like black kids, how like you'll say something to them and they're just like, and you're like, are you there? Like, are you there? Hello, is anybody home? Like, do you understand words? And it's just a bunch of in word, loud, 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 and all children can learn. I'm a firm believer in that. I can't tell you how many students have written me letters and said, Dr. Johnson, honestly, I thought this was the hardest class. I wasn't sure even if I wanted you as a teacher, but I have never had anybody push me, and I feel so much more prepared for college. That's literally what seniors told me last week before they graduated. Wrote me letters and said this to my face. And those are the ones who, when they wanted an easier way out, because this particular group just happened in my elective, just happened to be white kids, whatever, is their parents wouldn't let them. Their parents didn't come to the parent-teacher conference. I said I haven't had white students. I'm just like, go ahead and take them out. I don't care. Your kid don't want to learn. That's on you. Because that's what they do to black kids, But that's not how they responded. Because they still want their kids to have the best opportunities. And you sit your ignorant black ass up there and let your kid fundamentally continue to not grow and make excuses for them. Oh, so the research paper that I gave back with comments, sent it back like 8:15 in the morning, like on Google Classroom, it all goes out. Maybe you don't, because so everybody gets their paper at the same time. I always give them back at the same time. By 10:27 that morning, mom had sent what would be on regular paper at least 3 pages of an email to the dean about I, as a teacher, have no right to say that there was a lack of effort put into the paper, this, that, and the other. Effort is very subjective. I'm an educator. And it was nonsense. But yes, I did read it all. And the dean said to me, I only made it to the first paragraph. I'm not dealing with this. Like, I don't know. Like, she doesn't understand that I took notes. When you told me it's all on Google Classroom, it's not like, I don't even understand what she's refuting. She was like, but I do know, this is what the dean's telling me. I do know she probably called her mother crying. And I was like, well, And so she was like, no, this isn't the first time. She said, because I told her, I said, you can no longer be the sports manager for the high school team because you missed too many classes and your work is too far behind. She called her mother. Her mother calls me and tells me I don't have the right to tell her daughter what she can't do. And she was like, actually, I can when this has interfered with the academic performance. She said, so I'm sure she probably did that. You mean within 2 hours, and you're a teacher. I don't think y'all realize how much goes into being a teacher. But if you're doing what you're supposed to do, and this was not a holiday, you don't have that kind of time. Number one, what you should have done was you should have waited till your daughter got home so you could look at that paper and look what I wrote. Number two, effort is subjective. It is. It's short. Yeah, and it's my class. So my subjective opinion does matter. Yes, there is a lack of effort. I could have also reported your child for academic plagiarism because that was not the first time it has happened. And they would have put her out of school. And when I see black kids not reading, but then they want to complain about all these social justice issues and this, that, and the other, it's very performative to me. They don't even know, like, yeah, you should be angry about the police killing us. You should be angry that Carmelo Anthony is getting 35 fucking years for defending himself in all these states where they have the stand your ground law or some kind of remixed version of it. It's just not for you. That boy was fighting for his life. And you got the nerve to not make your kids read, and they're burning books, banning books, and them same black kids will be like, yeah, we never learned about ourselves. No, you never did your goddamn work. Because y'all have opportunity. And it's infuriating to me that the way in which they are learning to interpret this and the history and tradition of African-American teachers, especially in the South, this is what I meant by politics and respectability. Yes, you come to school. Yes, you may not always have nice things, right? But people in the community would help you out if they could. They would give you money. They would contribute. Mary McLeod Bethune started a school with $5 fucking on a goddamn trash heap. Think about the environmental impact. she went from having a school for girls, they typically were separate, and there were black people working on the railroad, not making much money. And so she ended up expanding it and just building it. I mean, this woman pushed off the Klan. Go see about it. Marva Collins in the 80s started West Side Preparatory Academy. And I put the link in here because she's like the most amazing thing. And she reminded me of myself. And I felt really empowered by that. And the only reason why I ever came into contact with her name was because you remember how Tavis Smiley used to have the State of the Black Union? Us millennials probably remember that. And it was on C-SPAN. And they'd have it maybe once a year, twice a year, was because she was on one of the panels. And her work was some of the most incredible work. It is so important to me that you make your Black kids read and also teach them a level of respect. These are also some of the things that I was saying about church. And I wish I could remember that guy's name on TikTok, because I mentioned this before, when he talked about third literary spaces. He was like, church used to be one of those. I know that for a fact. There were always people encouraging me, saying, I saw your name in the newspaper or an honor roll, or, you know, whatever it was, right? And when you find out that even some of your Sunday school teachers who were older didn't even have high school educations later, but they knew the Bible and they could read good enough. And their attitude wasn't, how can I destroy you so you can be like me? Because there's some people that don't want their kids to do better than them. It took me till I was about 30, 33 to like really let that hit. I didn't know. And those people encouraged me every step of the way, give me money, would give me cards and tell me how proud of me they were. And as you get older, it makes it all the more necessary to do it, because they didn't have an opportunity the same way, but they were constantly learning. They were the people that constantly may have been cooking during vacation Bible school or during these sort of enrichment times, like on enrichment Saturdays where we would read, and that would be like an extra thing we did in addition to school at church. And church lacks discipline these days because, and I'm talking about the people that are like charlatans in the pulpit, and there's a lot of them. There are a lot of them. Why do you think so many churches are non-denominational? Because if you're in a denomination, there has to be a gatekeeper, and gatekeepers are necessary. That means those are the people that decide whether or not you're ordained. Do you know the Bible well enough? Will you mislead people because you have not interpreted the Bible correctly, have not been through seminary? Like, yeah, actually gatekeeping does matter. Actually not letting dumb Black people into positions or sell out Black people into positions that end up making them speakers for us. Yeah, I do think we should gatekeep. Okay? Not gatekeep in the sense that like you're keeping other Black people out of jobs. You know, like the kind of stuff that happens to Monique or any of our like real great greats, but nevertheless. And we are effectively pushing our kids back further and further. School will never teach your kid everything you need to know. And I had some stories with Black people, okay? Just in these spaces, like getting questioned, and white people do this stuff too, but getting questioned about my degree. What did you write it on? Where'd you get it from? Okay, or we can talk about the fact that your child doesn't know how to write. That would help. I would love to talk to you about their writing skills and what you can help do improving. But is this a game you want to play? By all means, let's do it. But there's a piece of me that's like, the reason why I think it bothered me so. And the dean wrote them back. They didn't respond. Of course, if the parents didn't respond. That you have given this kid at 16 years old, and you've apparently been given them license to not work hard, to not take their education seriously. And they know that even when they lie, you will defend it. So you don't encourage them to tell you the truth. You also create a hostile relationship with the teachers and people, you know, in the administration that are going to deal with your kid. But also, you don't care, so they don't either. It's hard for me to get to that point. But I was just like, okay, this is what you want to do? Go on with life. I ain't got nothing for you. But I know it is a slippery slope. The consequences are not the same. Private school won't save you. And you are sitting here ungrateful. Now, meanwhile, I had two other black girls in my class that initially struggled before. But once again, the difference is coming to me and saying that I really need help. I just don't, and wrote an excellent research paper because that's my job as a teacher. If I only leave you where I met you, I have done you a grave disservice. And it's Jacob's ladder. Every round goes higher and higher. It should. Y'all motherfuckers is slipping all down the ladder. Y'all don't even have sense enough to have standards for your kids. Black teachers didn't make money like that in the South. Like, these are not black people, like, even in places like Chicago and stuff, were building their own schools with water leaking. The city wasn't giving them money. They don't want us to be educated. Because once you're educated, it's hard to make an educated person a slave. That's why it was denied so long. So yes, our attitude should be different. It can't just simply be the comparison, white kids don't do it too. Yeah, but the consequences aren't the same. They're not. And I hate to see opportunity for black kids to develop their intelligence just thrown to the ground. But it is. And these are the people raising these kids. Like, I'm so troubled by how stupid everybody's allowed to be. And when I say there's grown people, like grown people who sit on the train of all places when your signal is not even regular. And this, like, why is your phone on TikTok videos, YouTube videos, and whatever else up as high as it can go instead of you getting some goddamn headphones? And don't let more than one person be doing it. And that happens all the time. And I'm just like, what the fuck is happening? There are times when I have seen black children on a train or black kid on a train just reading a book. Maybe, late middle school, 7th, 8th grade, maybe 9th grade. And I just want to cry because it warms my heart so much. And I just did not grow up in a home, not simply where my parents didn't want us to be done, and they didn't, and they made that clear. Okay. Not simply where the standards were high or close to impossible, but what I do know is that when your parents expect a lot of you, you'll try to reach it. Because parental expectations, there's a reason why people never seem to get over not having their real parents in their lives or them not doing certain things for them, is because they are so connected. And the fact that you don't take education seriously enough is so mind-blowing to me. Because a lot of people in private schools, just because they didn't want their kids to accidentally get integrated into a school with black children. And we all know integration meant like 4 black kids and shit. And to meet it with constant resistance and for that just to be nourished with it, that is we say it's a slave mentality. It is and it isn't. Because there were plenty of black people sneaking and trying to learn to read. And the fact that black people had to sneak, learn to read, harm themselves. I'm reading this book now. Howard Thurman, I don't know if y'all know who he is, but he was this great black theologian. And he talks about living in Daytona, Florida, and the segregation. This man had to figure out as a boy how to get into a high school. He didn't have enough money, right? His church, the people around him put money in. They want to send him to this boarding school. And I think maybe I want to say North Carolina. I can't remember exactly. And this is just him get to Florida. He has a trunk of all the stuff he had, like clothes, because, they couldn't afford to rebuy it. And he's sitting there at the train station and, the white man says to him, like, look, the bottom line is you're going to have to buy another ticket for this trunk. You can't just buy. He was like, this is all my stuff. And he just sits there and he weeps. He's like 14, 15 years old because he was like, in his mind, they've given me this. This is all they have. I'm just going to have to go back to doing daily work, And he says this man comes up, black man, tall black man, overalls. He has this little hat. And this is the way he described it, in these really old, rusty kind of work boots. And the black man leans over him and says, this is autobiography, says, what the hell are you crying about? And he says, I told him. And he says, the man goes over there to the window or something, comes back and says, here. He said, if you're trying to go to school, the least I can do is help you. He said, I don't know that man's name. I can't even remember his face, but I'm so grateful for him. And I think that's a miracle. I'm one of those people who think there's nobody but God. And I believe it. And I also believe it because Black people, particularly in the South, hadn't understood. I'm not saying there's not ignorant people who think, oh, that school ain't nothing. I'm not saying that. But there are also Black people who just want to see other Black people do well. And I feel like that has declined. I feel like people feeling like they should have to make their Black kids read because we don't want to hurt their feelings. We want them to grow and be. Yes, we would love that. We would love that. But the police are still murdering us. High school kids still get to bully Carmelo Anthony and he goes to jail for defending himself. Like, what the fuck? I told you one of the most painful things, and the thing I can't stand to see if I see one more Black mother crying over losing her son, whether it's physically to violence, racial violence, and part of that, the helplessness in that, is because white people control the system. And they've done it so many times. And it makes you feel helpless because you don't control it. And then you have people who really have their Black kids thinking that, no, you shouldn't have to do that if you don't want to, and da-da-da-da-da-da-da-da. And I'm sorry, I'm just too concerned about the lack of education across this country, the way in which we can curate what kind of information we get from whom. You only know how to go, this is bullshit. Something's not right about this if you've been reading. The one thing I can always say, never stop reading. There's always something new that'll come out. There's always something you can understand. And quite frankly, go back to the classics. Because a lot of people just borrow from those, professors included. And it just makes me very angry. Makes me very angry when people play with it. And we're doing a disservice. Y'all are doing a disservice to y'all's kids. No, I don't have any kids. But I teach them every damn day. Because I don't, I start the summer school stuff. But like, we have got to do something about this. This is a crisis. It's a crisis because the racism is exponentially going up. They're like, oh yeah, the United States will be half, people of color by 2050. Yeah, sure. I can't tell you how many racist white women I've seen with Black husbands and Black children. The stuff that comes out of their mouths. And God forbid if their kid likes me. That same sort of resentment. But I'm worried about us. And, book recommendations, Sky Full of Elephants, read it by Sibo Campbell and Afrofuturist. It just begins by saying, one morning, all the white people walked into the lake, across the country, lake, ocean, wherever, and they killed themselves. And there's a few white people left in a certain part of Alabama, but it's Charles Brunton, this Black man, is the protagonist. And he has a mixed race daughter that he doesn't have a relationship with, but her mother accused him of raping her after they had sex several times. And he ends up going to prison. He only gets let out because all the white people were dead. And that, I just really encourage that. I really encourage people to go get the autobiography of Martin Luther King Jr. because it's based on it's based on a series of his writings, not him telling his whole story. So you can hear his voice. An act of state. The execution of Martin Luther King Jr. This is important. You want to know why? Because it was not James Earl Ray who killed him. It was the CIA. They proved it in court. This is his lawyer who writes all about it. In A Battle for Peace by W.E.B. Du Bois is a series of essays during the McCarthy era. I don't know why, I'm just trying to help people. This, the Black Woman in Anthology by Toni Cade Bambara, and you should look up to see if there's a screening of the film about her life, because it's going around the country right now. Toni Cade Bambara wrote this in 1970, and this is really a response to things like the Moynihan Report and, what Black women are experiencing while they're having this larger Black movement. But the things that are not being associated when it comes to Black women, gender-based violence, that kind of thing. It's an anthology. I have 2 copies of this just in case one ever gets burned. All right, and I have it on Kindle. Too Heavy a Load. Black Women in Defense of Themselves from 1894 to 1994. Deborah Gray White, look her up. This is a classic. I remember the first time I read this, I was like, oh, explosion. I love when I have those moments. But yeah, make sure that, you look these people up, because what it does, it begins actually with the Anita Hill things. This was written in the 90s. And she says, she goes through this whole process, so on and so forth. And she goes, at the end of the day, all we have is ourselves. Those Black people still supported Clarence Thomas's promotion to the Supreme Court. And I say supported, not like we voted for it. But when he said this is a modern day lynching, something went off in the brains of Black people. That he was able to use that language, hates Black people and supports violence against them, and had been a conservative, and had a history of doing this to women. But that was the Black community's response. It was Black community's response to Mike Tyson and his rape of Desiree, was it Porter or Washington? Why do I want to say? I can't remember. It's, oh, she's not innocent. That's the internalized ideas about ourselves. And so it's just important that we read these things. Steve Biko, freedom fighter in South Africa. Just like South Africa learned from segregation, they went around and visited in America and said, this is a great idea, colonize South Africa. They come back and they institute apartheid. They wanted a system like that, but an extreme one. They wanted an even better one. They're going to break it up into gradations of color because, they're a majority. Steve Biko is heavily influenced by the Black freedom fighters in the United States. And he says, you know what? We've done all of these things for so long. Over in America, they don't consider themselves colored versus Black versus Indian versus this, that, and the other. And I was like, as I remember reading, I was like, yeah, because we didn't have a choice. But it really doesn't matter, because what he took from it was, so all of those Black people are still experiencing the same kind of oppression. They fight together. And that's what we should do. That's part of the kind of streamlining of organizing. And he does SASO, the South African Students Organization, heavily influenced by STIC, the Student Nonviolent Coordinating Committee. So people, David Oyello, whatever your name is, fuck you. Saying a Nigerian accent, a Southern accent is just, you take the Nigerian accent down and put subservience and slavery in it. Another reason why we need to be enforcing education. Let me explain something to you. Y'all come over here, West Africans who may have been raised in Britain, especially, and then y'all come over here and y'all get parts in Hollywood movies playing African American heroes while degrading us. You do it for work. Black people, African Americans who are constantly denied work in Hollywood, other places, and Hollywood is problematic, whatever. They choose you all specifically to undermine us, and we know we've had a history of it. I am not about to sit here and explain, why is that true? That is true. And they know y'all are not going to speak out about social justice issues. That stupid ass movie, Judas and the Black Messiah, that was really about Mike O'Neill, not about Fred Hampton. Mike O'Neill's betrayal of him. Shout out to Jacoby Williams, who wrote a book on Fred Hampton, so on and so forth, and he made sure he made that point. See, a lot of y'all don't even know what you're looking at. And so you have this man imitating Fred Hampton, no connection to it. Cynthia Erivo, who's talked down about Black people not having culture and has come over here and can only get parts playing our Black heroes that have come through so much that y'all are telling us all we do is complain about. Subservience and slavery, how dare you? Dialects are all over the world. Number one, slavery is nothing to fucking joke about. And that tells me, especially about your presumption about African Americans from the South. It's subservience in their voice. See, if they weren't so subservient, they wouldn't have been enslaved. No, you motherfuckers sold us out. You want to go there? Let's go. Let's go. And you say Nigerian, like people didn't come from Ghana and Benin as well. Like, what are you talking about? Sierra Leone. What are you talking about? No, because that's an idea of what he thinks about us. He's also married to a white woman, made a movie about this Nigerian king or something marrying this white princess, and the issue was how the Africans were not okay with the fact that she was white. This is it. Once again, the projection of his imagination in Hollywood films. Why would Africans be mad about that, darling, in this fictional tale? Because when you come over, you're colonized. And now the white chick is the motherfucking victim. It don't go no further than that. I wasn't willing to watch that and get an ounce of a stream, but previews and stuff like that. Look up I Am Dupree. Dupree. She's on TikTok. She made another video about it. They're telling us we have no culture. From the way we talk to HBCU bands, HBCU culture, like where's all of this bullshit coming from? They're copying it and then acting like, oh yeah, you can't even be on TikTok talking about the HBCU effect, then it's the PWI effect. You do realize that HBCUs are called HBCUs because every other college is a predominantly white institution. Like the fact that people are even trying to use that language. Like you don't have to go to a black college, but what you don't get to do is pretend like my education was less than yours for no other reason than the fact that black people taught me. And then want to mimic and copy the culture, but still needing white validation. You need to deal with that. But you got white people on here, Asian people on here, Latinos always copying the African American vernacular dance and everything else. And then always another one of those silent animosities, outright disrespect. And I've had enough of it. But you got to have sense enough to also be offended. You have that sense enough to also know there's a history of doing this to you. And like James Baldwin said, you know, he was like, to be a black person in this country is to almost, and this is paraphrasing, is to feel like a perpetual sense of rage if you know something. If you're, you know, rooted in that and you see what's around you, it should infuriate you. You should be like, and when it happens to other black people, like, oh my gosh. One of the most infuriating things I saw was when that black girl in Texas, I know y'all remember this, like maybe 2013, 2014, and they were at a pool party and in a gated neighborhood, a black family had a pool party and they had the kids come over and the black girls were walking in their bathing suits and the police pull up on them and bang this girl's head down, bang this girl's head down, bang this girl's head down. And they have the black boys, they're all teenagers, by the way, arrested with their hands on it. But as he's hitting this black girl, as she's crying, call my mother, he's over there. That's what I'm talking about. He's tied up, laughing like, oh my gosh, this is what I'm talking about, the slow denigrate. You don't even have sense enough to be angry, mother. What the fuck is wrong with y'all? And y'all got the nerve to send y'all's kids to school and act like they just supposed to be there to hang out. And I'm not saying that you don't have Asian kids that do that, despite the stereotypes. White kids, all of this I've witnessed. But what I am saying is my concern is for black children because we live in an anti-black country. And it's proof that we can make it through. But y'all got to give a fuck more than about Krishan and Blueface and how many babies he's producing and talking about that. And these people don't deserve attention. Yes, we should keep this shit out of our kids' brains and eyes. The Zeus Network, only thing I've ever seen are like little clips from blogs or on YouTube. And I'm like, oh my gosh. Even when I think back to watching Flavor of Love, I still remember going, this is like a brothel. Me and my sister, like, But when you're raised to have a critical eye and not just accept what's being taught at you, thrown at you. We grew up with video girls and shit like that. Not everybody turned out like that. A lot of people did. Because that means in your home, that was not the example. That girl that got up on that stage in Chicago, walking across the stage, did a split, and not just any split, the kind of split where she is popping her ass, okay, like strippers do on the stage, and then to watch an interview on the news where she's the same sort of degenerate kind of reaction, saying, I don't feel like the principal should have said, take my diploma, this, that, and the other. Now, do I feel like that principal is not going to release her diploma? No. Of course she will. Yeah, okay, you earned your diploma. She did that because there needed to be some clear consequences for that kind of behavior. They told you not to do it, but it's also suggested. And my thing is, even in the interview, I think her mother was like, see, right there, the principal is saying this, that, and the other. Because when the shot is taken, it's not from her, the student. What kind of fucking people have raised you that you didn't get your ass whooped? And this is also what I mean by raising kids. I realize you don't need to get, there's a difference between discipline and abuse, okay? But I think all children should have a healthy fear of their parents because they know what won't be accepted and what will be. Expectations, not just abuse, because a lot of these people will beat the shit out of their kids because they feel individually offended. And then the next day their kids can do the same thing to somebody else and they laugh at it. That's how trauma is created. And she's just like, I don't understand. They let your dumb ass on the news to say that. These people are emblematic, her parents. Like, the way I would have never done that, there wasn't enough dares. You couldn't have offered me, like people saying, if they offered you $400 million, would you have done it? Like, no. Actually, yes, my integrity is that type. Discipline and standard. Why would you think that was okay? And yes, this is what I mean by positive respect. No. Respect your goddamn self enough to not act like a hoe in the strip club. Because regardless of what they tell you, regardless of what's glamorized, they don't want to be there either. They don't. That's why so many of them end up on drugs and alcohol. They've run out of choices. That is not what you want to act like and be like. You can still respect people's humanity and also take your kids and say, you don't ever want to end up like that. That's why you stay in school. That's why I tell you to be respectful. That's why I tell you can't run with everybody. You got to be okay with being by yourself. Because they have to know that there's something. Like somebody threatening to call your parents at home, and that doesn't send shockwaves through your body. Y'all are the problem. And y'all are turning out these kids for us to deal with. I don't like being in society with so many people who are obviously dumb and who have also learned how to, weaponize mental health. There are people with real mental health issues, but just because you don't feel like doing something like that day, or I don't feel like being in school, we all didn't feel like being in school plenty of times. I wasn't allowed to say that in my house. I wasn't allowed to say, we don't like school. We weren't allowed even to say that. And my sister taught my niece that. And guess what? You're turning out really good. But this is a crisis. This is a real crisis because the problem is not simply lack of education. It's a lack of a desire for education and a lack of parental standards. The fact that this girl got up on the news. We got to stop pretending and overanalyze all stuff. Yeah, we police black girls' bodies. We do. Yes. That's a different story. There's a time and a fucking place. And this is what I also meant by having discipline and the kind of things that even if you don't go to church now, but if you were raised like in a religious structure or order, and I can only speak from the Baptist experience, but I've seen this with, Muslims and stuff like that. There is something about learning that one, there's something bigger than yourself, that there's a greater purpose in life to serve God. There is boundaries and standards The 10 Commandments, even if you did break them. You knew that right from wrong. Because see, if you know right from wrong, even when you go wrong, you'll at least be able to get back to right. But if you go around just thinking, yeah, it's their fault. It's their fault. It ain't never my fault. So now we just have a whole society of consistently budding narcissists. And they did it to these kids. And when people tried to correct you, the idea that when people try to correct your kid, I don't like people to correct my kid. You don't say shit to my kid, come and say it to me. Well, sometimes you ain't around. A lot of times you ain't around, and it's obvious. Somebody trying to keep your kid from hurting themselves? Yes. Are there pedophiles in neighborhoods all over this country, unfortunately? And they're not new. But when you start having the attitude, nobody can say anything to my kid, that's when people go, fine. And then they end up in trouble, like trouble, like in jail trouble. How come nobody said anything to me? Where is the church? You ain't never gone to no church. Your kid never had any standards or boundaries or respect for limits. And I'm not talking about, you'll never be above this level in life. Tracy Morgan had the nerve to say teachers make minimum wage. I hate teachers. Teachers teach the kids that there's a ceiling. No, they don't. No, they don't. Trust me. We tell your kids they can be anything, even when it makes us want to go. Like, and people on the Breakfast Club talking about plenty of rappers have said that. There's a lot of people that say that shit for, a hardcore song. That does not, I'm not saying there aren't bad teachers, but you know what? There's bad lawyers. There's bad doctors. They get sued for malpractice, but their profession is never put on, as like the blame for everything in society. Y'all don't even pay. People are actually, if teaching was so great, people would not be quitting with no other job options. And for Tracy Morgan, first of all, Tracy Morgan, if somebody did call you slow, which you didn't say, but I was thinking to myself, if they did, they were right. All this dumbass slapstick comedy you do, your whole thing is to act stupid and act homeless and act like you can't speak. Like, he has no range whatsoever. You've gotten lucky, sir. But how are you going to say you hate teachers? But this is my problem. And then you send your kids to school. Are they supposed to respect them? See, it's not about money. It's about values. That white boy tried to give you a few outs, right? Like, oh, my teacher said this, and, you're not going to make it doing, getting paid, acting silly and mischief. I don't doubt that people say that kind of stuff to warn kids, but this has gotten out of control. And once again, but in a capitalist society, in a racialized capitalist society, here this black man is rich. He hates teachers. Why isn't he correct? He's rich. Teachers make minimum wage. We do not make minimum wage. But my thing is, because we're not paid by the hour. If that was the case, we get overtime. I am still I'm a one-person advocate for teachers having billable hours like lawyers, okay, because we work all night. And I'm not saying that there aren't kids that get discouraged. It's not that there isn't racism in classrooms, but there's racism at the doctor's office, right? There's racism when that lawyer doesn't believe and gives a poor defense, Carmelo Anthony's lawyer. You see what I mean? But we always blame the people that seem to have the least and are at the bottom of society. Teachers are low-hanging fruit. Once again, because money makes you powerful in this country. How do you get it? Scamming. This whole country's a goddamn con. You stole this land. You stole people to work it for free and then tell us that we have some nerve to continue to ask them for things. White men are now the victims. I'm disgusted. And I want y'all to take education more seriously. Even if you don't have kids, I'm sure you know some. We were clearing out the classrooms. And this happens every year. And those teachers in my department were putting all of them by the trash, old books. When I say old, what I mean is an earlier edition of a book, because we're going to buy new ones. By the fucking trash can. What did I tell you at the beginning of this video? I was taught to value books. One of the most long-lasting memories and gifts I have is from my grandfather, who built me a bookshelf by hand. I will never forget that. I dedicated my dissertation to him because of it. And because he was just the greatest man in the world. God rest his soul. But this is like, they were going to throw them away. I said, no. First of all, one, even if there's, prison books programs, it's not always, certain people who take in book donations. I don't like to, whatever it was, I knew throwing away books when the kids needed them was a terrible fucking idea. And so, of course, I always end up, we go through this every year. And, so while we got some extra books, we put some extra ones on that cart too. Thank you. Thank you. Because I refuse to let books be thrown away by the rich when other people can have them. And these are not, let me be clear, these are not even like worn books. Okay, and that's how you can tell who's reading them. Nevertheless, all right. That's I really want y'all to tell me what you think. I really want y'all to tell me, your reasoning for hating teachers. I'm not saying, because trust me, I had some bad ones too. But the good outweighed the bad. And teachers are the ones who teach you, professors, to become the doctors, the lawyers, the other teachers. And whatever else you choose, the public health, not advocates, but people who actually do work, research, that kind of thing. And we are the most, I don't want to say most despised, because I feel like people who work in the service industry, like custodians and stuff like that, I'm not here to like carry on that way. But once again, it sends a bad signal. It sends a bad example. You can say what you want about Tupac, and I will always say he's the greatest rapper that ever lived. He's my favorite rapper that ever lived. Tupac was always reading. You notice how he went up and down his emotions and things like that? He was always revising himself. He wrote Still I Rise. You want to know why? Because Maya Angelou corrected him on set when he was doing poetic justice for his kind of behavior and cursing around women, going all off and this, that, and the other. And she pulled him aside and basically said, young man, why are you acting like this? Something like, we love you, but we want. And she said he just melted. He just cried like a baby. He needed to be corrected. He was out of control. He needed somebody to tell him that he loved him. But he was able to accept correction and also able to have this intellectual conversation where he continued to grow. Why? His mother may have been on drugs. His mother was still trying to help other people with their tenants' rights and things like that. She always encouraged him to read and to learn on his own. She was constantly pouring into him, even with an addiction. Those early years matter. Teaching your kids that school doesn't matter, your teacher's stupid. And people do tell their kids this, okay? Your teacher's stupid, they just do this because they can't do anything else. Then why the fuck are you sending your kids to us? What does that make you at that point? We got to get it together. And these are my thoughts. And, my videos on education usually don't get hits. And that's just what it is. But I'm not going to stop because it's just too important. I'd rather have engagement in the comments with this kind of thing. All right. Anyway, happy Monday. There's no such thing. I'll talk to y'all soon.